do this. Okay. So welcome everyone to the Oakcrest Neighborhood Council, March 9th, 2023. So glad to see all of you. And we have a wonderful lineup of guests tonight. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a few quick announcements. Some of you may be aware of these, but just wanted to reiterate. The wonderful Easter egg hunt is coming back to Laird Park. We will have that on Saturday, April 8th. And Carly Nielsen, who is our sponsor, has got some fun things planned. So whether you're old or young or in between, come and just watch the kids run around and get the eggs on the lawn, but also enjoy. I think there's going to be some wonderful musical entertainment. The 4th of July parade will be back on the 4th. That's always a big hit. And September 23rd, we'll have another annual yard sale. Just a couple of one more really important announcement. Public Lands would like us to participate in a survey, and the deadline is tonight. I think they'll accept them up till midnight. I don't know what the cutoff is, but today is the last day you can all hop on and enter your opinions about some projects in the park. And so you can go to our website. We've had a link on the website landing page all month, and that's yellcrestneighborhood.org. We just posted another announcement on our Facebook page today, and that's Yellcrest Neighborhood Council Facebook, and you can go there. And so there are lots of ways to get access to that survey. So I hope that you will take advantage of that and just weigh in. And it looks like, and without further ado, I'm going to get us started on our wonderful guest tonight. Brian, I see that you're here. If you want to unmute yourself and maybe even show us who you are, we'd love to see you on the screen if you are so inclined. Oh, there you are.
I am ready.
Why not show up?
Okay. Hello.
Brian, why don't you introduce yourself? I did a little intro on the newsletter I sent out, but because you're new and you've been brand new on the board, just elected and representing us, we're glad to welcome you. And just give a little background about yourself, and then please share with us some of your thoughts about what's going on in Salt Lake City schools.
Thank you. As you've said, I'm one of the newest board members on the Salt Lake City School Board. I have taught in the Salt Lake City School District for 11 years. I taught at Newman Elementary in Rose Park, a Title I school. My background would be I practiced law for 25 plus years, and I had my children go through the local schools here, Indian Hills, Clayton. A couple of my sons did the IB program at West when they were in 7th grade, but then they came back and wanted to go to East High. So all of my children graduated from East High. Having had these children in our public education system, there were things that I was concerned about. And 12 years ago, well, no, I guess it would be probably more like 13 or 14 years ago, I decided I didn't want to be one of those people on the couch saying, well, why don't you do this? I thought if I was serious that I needed to do something. So I went back and I got a Master's of Art teaching at Westminster College, and that is what took me to Newman Elementary. I retired last year. I had some health issues that are behind me, but that's what led to my retirement. And that's what led to my running for the school board. If I had not retired, I would not have been able to run. If you're a teacher in the district, you can't run for the school board, which I kind of question. It seems like it would be a good thing to have a teacher on the school board. And that's what a group of teachers approached me when they saw what was happening and asked me if I would consider doing that. So that is my background. We live just in the neighborhood right by the zoo. My email, if you would like to reach me, is brian.jensen@slcschools.org. There are a couple of other emails out there as well, but that's the one that I'm directing all of my school board emails to. I was 2 or 3 minutes late today. We have been trying as a board to figure out the logistics of scheduling an additional board meeting this coming Tuesday. We had our regularly scheduled board meeting last Tuesday evening. You are all invited to attend those. You can go to the Salt Lake City School District site, click on the board, and then it will take you to where you can click and join us on a YouTube channel. It's a public meeting, open to the public, and you can also watch them. They're recorded if you have interest in the topics that we're discussing on a particular agenda. On the agenda last night, or excuse me, Tuesday night, like I just mentioned, we were trying to figure out the timeline for our superintendent search. That's a number one priority for me. I'll tell you about 3 or 4 different things that we're working on. As an educator, and as I'm talking, if people have questions, I'm happy to have you unmute or raise your hand. I don't have all of you on my screen, so I don't know if I'll see all the hand. I'd have to be going back and forth. But anyway, if you have questions, or at the end, you can ask me questions as well.
I'll help you with that.
Okay. As an educator, I have felt that we have qualified individuals within the state of Utah that could serve as the superintendent of the Salt Lake City School District. We've had 3 superintendents over a period of 5 years. And the last 2, they used a nationwide search firm, and I think that we've had some challenges with that. And I felt, and I think that the other board members felt, that it would be good to look within the state of Utah for individuals that understand our educational system, the legislature that we work with, the culture that is unique to the state of Utah. So what we're doing right now is we are using it's called USBA. And what that stands for is the Utah School Board Association. In the state of Utah, there are, I believe it's 42 school districts scattered throughout the state. In the news, you hear about Canyons and Davis, but down in Kanab, there's a school district, and throughout the state. All of those school boards are a part of USBA, the Utah School Board Association. And they have, for the last, I would say 30 or 40 years, helped school districts in their search for superintendents. They recently helped Granite School District with their search. And that's the entity that we're using right now in our search. And as a side note, that board, which represents those 42 school districts, has a board of directors. And when I was first put on the board back in January, some of the board members asked me if I would be willing to serve on this other board. You are elected to that board. And I said, well, I'm new to this whole process. If there are others, I'm happy to support them. Anyway, they felt like with my 25 years of legal background that it would also be helpful. So there was an election and I was voted to be on that board, which would kind of tie in a little bit with Brian King and Senator Plum. When you're on that board, you're also part of what's called the Joint Legislative Committee. And while the legislature's in session, those board members, along with the superintendents that are on that board, they attend a joint legislative committee meeting every Friday for those 10 or 11 weeks that the legislature is meeting. And what we do there is we look at all of the legislation that is being introduced that affects education. And after we've reviewed it, we will either support the legislation, oppose the legislation, or not take action because we feel like we need more information before we can make a decision on that particular piece of legislation. So having said that, not in our board meeting last Tuesday, but in the last board meeting in February, in that public meeting, we had the director of USBA meet with us, and that's where we outlined the general approach to finding the superintendent. Martin Bates is the interim superintendent, and he will be leaving. He has a hard exit date, and he will be leaving at the end of June. So we need to have a new superintendent in place by the 1st of July. Right now, what we have done is we have created, well, first of all, we sent out a survey. And I hope that some of you saw it. I asked the school district in our board meetings to send out the survey to community councils and school SECs. And in that survey, we were asking the community what they felt were important qualifications or what they envisioned the superintendent of Salt Lake City would need to have. So we've received that survey back. We have now created a stakeholder committee that we, and when I say we, each board member has asked 2 or 3 individuals in our various precincts to be participants on that committee. And they will look at the applications that we receive from those that are interested. We need to have, well, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. If you go on the website, you will be able to see the application, and the application is due by the end of March. We will then take those applications and they will go out to this stakeholders committee for review, and they will rank them. And then after that, the board will look at those, and then we will ourselves have looked at all of the applications, and we'll make a decision as to the individuals that we want to have interviews with. And then there will be a first interview and a second interview. We're hoping that sometime in May that we will have selected the new superintendent so that that superintendent has some time to work with Martin Bates. And when I say that Martin Bates is the interim superintendent, that's correct, but he was also the superintendent of Granite School District for probably 20 years, or I'm not sure exactly the length of his tenure, but this is he has been a very effective superintendent, and I think that we're fortunate to, when I heard that the previous board had been able to acquire Dr. Bates's services, I think they did that last September, October. I thought this will be good to get us through until we have found a new superintendent. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of our superintendent search. The next item on our agenda, and if you watched our meeting just last Tuesday, there were individuals that came and spoke to the board about West High. In the previous board meeting, the last meeting in February, we had looked at the feasibility studies for a rebuild of West High School and Highland High School. So there has been significant community interest in those two. I mean, those are major projects, and two architectural firms have been working on this, and they have developed 4 options for West High and 3 options for Highland High. There have been meetings at West and at Highland where these different options have been presented. Each school has one option that the community and the architects have suggested would be the favored option. The board hasn't made any decisions yet, and there's still going to be some continuing public comment on that. And like I said, there was some last Tuesday in regards to West High. So that would be the second. I mean, there were a number of significant issues that I became involved in as I joined this board. The third one is, and I know I think my time is probably just about up, but the third one is the boundary study. Right now, we, back at the end of January, announced that there was going to be a boundary study done so that we could determine what revisions need to be there. The Salt Lake City School District population has had a significant decline, and there is, we're still seeing a decline. So we're going to be looking at those boundaries and what we need to do there. The district has been divided into 4 quadrants. Those quadrants don't mean that that's how we're dividing up the district. That's just how we're looking at the school, so that we have a systematic way to be looking at different areas of the city. In the first board meeting in February, the board asked the superintendent to
Brian, we just lost you. We're losing connection. You're talking, but your lips are moving, but we can't hear you.
All right.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So there is a director of this boundary study. His name is Brian Connolly, and he will be coming to all of the different schools. Like for Uinta, that was a meeting that I was just in, the Uinta SCC meeting with the principal, Bruce Simpson, and that got over at 6:20. And then I was trying to get to this meeting. But anyway, he told me then that they had heard from Brian Connolly, and he will be at their next community or school community council in April. I believe it's April 15th. I have to check to make sure. But each school will be having a meeting where you would all be invited to attend as well. There are going to be additional community meetings where the community will have input on what we're looking at. So I'm trying to keep this within, I think the agenda said I had till 6:52 or something. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
Well, you're being too
but-
precise, but you have, in other words, in summary, you have a lot of hot potatoes.
We
and
do have our work cut out for us.
we appreciate your service. I think I just want to open it up to the floor. Does anyone have questions? I think one of the things maybe that occurred to me, if I could also maybe stand Brian really quickly, what is your time table for the boundary study and, if necessary, closing schools?
That is a prolonged time period. In January, when it was discussed, this would take a year and a half for us to be able to go through and look at all of it. So like the school year that would be next year, so school year 2023, 2024, there would not be any changes. The earliest that it could be would be the school year 2024, 2025.
And just kind of going back, and I'll wrap this up. Going back to something you said about West, did something come up? You were talking about the feasibility studies. I know with West, we're looking at a lot of historic preservation there. And I've had a chance to look at the 4 options that the feasibility study came up with. Is there anything in particular you wanted to point out, or?
Well, we are, anxious to preserve what we can preserve.
Any
And in
dialogue?
fact, in the board meeting I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. I asked the director with the district that's over that particular assignment, are they preserving things now? Because like the sculptures at the west entrance, those were, and I know this because I guess my passion is early Utah art, and I collect early Utah art. And at the west side entrance, or not the west side, the south entrance of West High, there were 2 sculptures that were done by Mahan Rayan, who was a significant, well, he is nationally recognized as an important sculptor and painter. And they said they have already taken those sculptures, and they have them somewhere secure so that, because they already have been damaged over the years and things like that. There's art in there by LaGreen Richards, who did the dome of the Capitol when you look up in the rotunda and all of that sort of stuff. So I know that there are lots of preservationists that are interested in this. There is one option that provides for the school to be completely renovated and, made structurally sound, but you would be preserving the entire building. That option is $409 million, which is I think it's 110 million more than the next option. And the next option is preserving part of the building. It's preserving like 60% of the front facade of the building. So, I mean, the challenge that we're talking about is $109 million. And I mean, that is a significant amount of money. But along with that, if that option is the option that is pursued, that right now, the way that that is being presented by the architects is the students at West High would be in portables for 7 years while the building is being renovated, restored, preserved, all of the terms that you want to use. On the Salt Lake City School Board, we have 7 elected board members, and then we have 1 student board member, which I think is a really important thing. I think that you need to have the voice of the students on your school board. The student board member that is on the board is from West High. She's an extremely bright young woman. And in the meeting where the proposals were being presented and the different options, she said that the students at West High, so she's giving the voice, she's the voice for the students there, are saying, if you choose that option, that means that there are 2 cycles of students going through West High that will never have a real high school experience because they will be in portables. And the students are really asking that we not have that because they want to be able to have a high school experience.
And Brian, I'm so appreciative of everything you've said to us. Jen Plum is our next speaker, and I'd like to get her
Right.
on, if you don't mind. She
No,
is
that's great.
multitasking tonight. She just left a Girl Scout meeting. She's speaking at a Fair Park meeting tonight. We're trying to shoehorn her in. So we
Great.
appreciate it. We could come back to you if you want to hang with us.
Okay.
But we're going to turn to State Senator Jen Plum and get her on our call tonight. And we're so appreciative of your service, Brian. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I would just want to thank Senator Plum and Representative King for their hard work. I watched you in action in those joint.
Jen, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you for the kind words and also for watching in. It certainly did feel like we were not alone. Is my voice coming through okay? I can hear a weird feedback sound.
Brian, I'm going to have you mute your phone if you can mute. If everybody else can mute their phones, and we'll hear Jen.
Well, and thank you, Jan, for helping me navigate. It's funny how things get piled up. It's like nothing or 5 things. So I appreciate you being willing to help me navigate it. And also thank you, Representative King, for letting me tuck in before I tuck into the Fair Park. I probably don't have as much breadth of knowledge to share, and Representative King certainly will have more of that with the frame of reference historically. But, this session was this was one for the books. I hear, we looked at and passed a record number of bills, 575, I believe. And there were a lot of challenges in terms of the topic matters. I have not been there before, but multiple legislators told me this was one of the roughest sessions they'd been through. So I suppose, trial by fire. We dove right in immediately and to the space around our transgender youth, passing 3 bills that did limit medical care for those 18 and under, or under 18, I should say, made some birth certificate changes, and also made it kind of a process within the schools for if kiddos want to use different names and pronouns. There was a more positive bill passed that looked at actually codifying the anti-conversion therapy bans that had been put in place before with a resolution. So we dove right into that space. And I'll tell you, for me, as hard as it was to do that right away and to do some of the education spaces with 215, I'm actually glad they did it early so we didn't feel it hanging over our heads the entire time, because there was a whole lot of heavy work to be done. And I think that the writing felt to be on the wall for those. And so having them at least through the process freed up some space to deal with a lot of other heavy issues. We did work on reproductive rights and abortion, with one bill significantly limiting where folks can get access to termination of pregnancy services. A lot of heated debates, and I hope there will be some more pieces put into place that allow for appropriate exceptions for people whose lives are at risk or well-being are at risk. Education, boy, there were a lot of education pieces, and I'm still diving through a lot of them to look at what the long-standing impact will be. There were a couple of, I think, bad bills that dealt with being anti-DEI that were able to be put on hold for study or be stopped. I know there's a lot of politics around that space, but I think that the policy part is a lot harder. And so looking at what it means to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what that means for institutions and what that means for funding, I'd like us to be very thoughtful before we, I heard from one person at the U, they would lose just in philanthropic donations, probably $100 million by passing some of those. So, I think, like I said, there's going to be some hard conversations, but before politics influence it, let's look at policy. I wish there would have been more done on the Great Salt Lake. I know there was a lot of talk, there was a lot of support. This record-breaking snow year is probably not helping all that much with people's not feeling the same direness, but I did feel a ton of will toward that, and did a couple of small pieces toward that with passing a bill to get us a Great Salt Lake license plate, as well as being fortunate enough to sponsor Representative Lesser's state crustacean bill. Great kiddos from Emerson Elementary came up with that idea, and it was probably one of the joys of my legislative experience to see those kiddos up there teaching the senators and the representatives and making them, see how important it is that kids see they can make a change. One day we're all going to want to retire, right? We need those kids to want to step in and believe they can make a change. Bills that I personally worked on, some in that space I'm familiar with overdose death prevention. We were able to get fentanyl test strips made legal in this state, which I'm hopeful will be helpful. We did pass the Great Salt Lake license plate, as I mentioned, a settlement bill to deal with the opioid settlement funds, which I really think is going to be important that we're wise about transparency as well as appropriateness of spending there. And then a bill I'm actually really excited about that limited the amount of predatory behavior that private probation providers can exert in court spaces. So those were my kind of 4 bills that I was able to usher through, and I feel really fortunate to have cared deeply about all those and to be able to see them get through. I know I'm probably ticking off the minutes, but I want to mention a couple other near misses. There was House Bill 329, which was the event permits notification amendments. That was a bill, I think, not too thinly veiled at some drag performers, et cetera. And again, that's an issue that would have a lot of implications for cities, a lot of liability issues, and a lot of different opinions from cities. And so I'm glad that it was not advanced forward. I think that's something municipalities locally can be dealing with, and not the big heavy hand. There was a drug-induced homicide bill that we were able to put down in the Senate that just went too far. There was, again, those DEI bills I mentioned, House Bill 451 and 283, that were both not advanced. There was a feral cat bill that, I tell you, that's where I probably got the most emails on, was the cat colonies and the feral cat bill. So as a self-proclaimed crazy dog lady, I recognized my other animal folks, and they went all in, but that did not make it out of the Senate. And then finally an unemployment insurance amendments one that would require people, they would lose their unemployment benefits if they had not accepted, I believe the term was suitable work that had been offered to them, and again, just went too far. So I'll have an email going out if anyone wants to get on my email list. I would love to, be able to share those with you. There's some great links to funding and where that, all the kind of bigger piece bits of our funding went. We spent, $29-ish billion, record investments in education, although complications there because of it being some of the food tax being tied to the educational earmark, and more to be determined with what comes out of that. There will be, it seems, a ballot initiative to look at whether the residents of Utah want there to actually be that continued earmark that's guaranteed to go to education or not. So town hall meeting will be coming up with Representatives King and Briscoe and Jen Daly Provo. We'll be having that at Bryant Middle School on March 23rd at 6:30. So I'll make sure you have the little flyery thing, Jan, to include for all of your folks, for anyone who'd like to join and ask some questions and dialogue in person. And I think that probably about sums it up for me in my admittedly a little bit pressured speech way of presenting it. If there's any questions that come right to you, holler them at me, or otherwise feel free to shoot me an email or come see at that town hall.
Any questions for me? Well, I really love the crustacean bill. We now have the official
Right? I know.
state crustacean. It's the shrine, the brine shrimp.
It's the brine shrimp. And as much as I thought I knew about it, not only the biology of the ecosystems, but the impact on our, the business piece of it. And I was really, if you want to go back and see something inspiring, go look at those committee meetings where the kids talked to both the representatives in the House committee and the Senate committee and talked about how important was. There was not a word in the room. Everybody was listening and learning, and it was pretty cool. So again, maybe the dollars will roll in after, and as a freshman senator, all I can hope is maybe to shift the hearts a bit. So it felt like that was a piece of that.
Well, good luck to you, Jan. Thanks for representing us. You're always accessible. I know I saw you on the Hill. You made arrangements to meet with me and some other folks, and I just really appreciate that, your willingness to talk and listen.
Thank you. Likewise. That's what we got to keep doing is more talking and brainstorming and making things better, not worse.
And we'll let you run because I think you have to.
Okay, I will. And to be continued.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks all. Bye-bye. Thanks, Brian,
Okay.
for letting me step in.
Okay, Brian King, I was looking back into your history. This is your 8th term. Wow.
Man, when you say it that way, it seems so.
But you're a young guy. I mean, you've been doing this since you were 15. So, it's so
I wish I felt that young, but
well, listen, we're really pleased to have you both.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Former Yale-Cresters, and so
well, yeah, and Yale-Crest is close to home. I lived in the Yale-Crest Community Council from 1999 to 2018. So there are a lot of people that I know and love well, and it's a great group of folks. So
we'll let you go ahead and take over.
okay, I'll try not to take too long because I know you have other things. I'm sure you have other things that you can talk about, but Senator Plum talked about a number of things that I think are important for us to review as part of the legislative process. We had a lot of bills, as she said, 575, which was one more than we've ever passed. And it was sort of remarkable. If you are following this at all, one of the things that I would sort of say as an overview is and Senator Plum didn't have the perspective that I have. This is my 15th session. So I've seen a few legislators come and go, and I've seen a few sessions. And the thing that struck me about this session, I think, is I don't think I've seen a session that was as partisan and that was as I don't want I love my colleagues up there, but I got to tell you, it was hard. This was a difficult, painful session for me in many respects. We had some good things that happened. Let me go through some of those first. We funded all-day kindergarten. I was thrilled with that. I think that Democrats and others have been talking about doing that for a long time. And when you're talking about serving as a Democrat in the supermajority legislature, what you find over and over and over again is that ideas that you have been talking about for years are rejected for years. And then many of them, not all of them by any means. I mean, it's not like we have every good idea in the book, but there are a lot of ideas that we talk about for years. And then eventually the Republican supermajority decides that the time for those things has come, and they put them in place. Earned income tax credit is one of those things. A lot of our clean air bills are on that list. Some of the we had the period project, which took place a couple of years ago. Democrats had been pushing the idea of making available having greater access for our girls and women for their hygiene products for years. And finally, a couple of years ago, the Republicans decided the time for that has come, and they took it over and ran it and claimed credit for it. But it's not all about credit, of course. It's what is important and good and what's productive for the people of the state of Utah. My point is simply that many times we have to wait a lot longer than we should for good policies to come into place. And that's true. All-day kindergarten is a perfect example of that. We've been talking about that for years. And the data and our Brian Jensen, I'm sure, can weigh in on this. I see him nodding his head. The data across the country on this is absolutely crystal clear. These kids who have access to all-day kindergarten as well as pre-K, good pre-K resources for education, do remarkably better the rest of their educational time frame and for the rest of their lives because of that. So early resources for that kind of stuff is critically important, and we finally funded that in a way that we have never funded it before this session. So I was thrilled about that. We extended and expanded some Medicaid for coverage of some fairly narrow population of expectant moms, but that was a good thing. We also, in the same vein, passed some bills. My colleague, Representative Matthews, in our Democratic caucus, passed a couple of bills dealing with childcare, expanding access to childcare for state healthcare or for state employees, and also maternal coverage amendments for state employees. Those are bills that Representative Matthews sponsored and that we got through, which were very family-friendly bills and very important for supporting women and children and infants. We had some social media bills that were interesting from Representative Tusher and Senator McKell. This was something that was very bipartisan in nature. Those were two, Representative Tusher and Senator McKell are both Republicans. They did good work, in my humble opinion, on our social media bills, because I think that most of the folks at the legislature, and I think most of the folks in the state of Utah, are concerned about the degree to which there are negative impacts on our minors, on our children especially, for some of these social media websites. And there's very little accountability, and we tried. I mean, we're a very small population compared to the population worldwide of the audience of places like Facebook and Instagram and some of the other social media sites, but we did what we could to move the needle on that point, and Governor Cox is all behind it. This is an important point from his perspective too. So there are many issues, important issues, where Democrats and Republicans work together to accomplish some good things. And of course, when we're talking about acting as Democrats, we can't get our bills through without having support from our Republican colleagues. And we have them for many important issues, and we can get their support and get important legislation passed. A couple of other things we had. Elimination of school grading. I thought that was a good thing. I don't know, Brian Jensen, whether you think that's a good thing, but I thought school grading is talk about a performative exercise and something that is just basically a waste of time, I think, and absolutely misleading, quite honestly. So we've been working hard for years to get rid of that. That was again a bipartisan effort, and we got that taken care of. We defeated a couple of bills that were bad. There was a bill making state employees basically employees at will. That was a bill that the governor supported. It was a bill that many people thought the skids were greased for, and it was going to go through with no problem. And I was quite honestly amazed that it was defeated in the House by a pretty healthy margin and a bipartisan effort. And I was grateful for that. Had a lot of good Republican colleagues who were against that bill, along with all the Democrats, and that was a very important bill. Interestingly, we had the state flag. I don't know how many people really care about this. Some people really do. Other people say, what in the world are you wasting your time on this for? Dan McKay, who started out in the House and now moved over to the Senate, makes me crazy at times. He's sponsored some bills that I absolutely hate, anti-abortion bills and tax bills that I hate. But he was working on this flag bill, and he's worked on it for many, many months. And he and I had many conversations about it. He came to me and said, how can you help me get this flag bill through the House? Do you like the new flag? What do you think of it? And I said, yeah, I like it, actually. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's a flag, for crying out loud. But it's an important symbol of the state of Utah. And I'm sure that there are people here on the call who hate the idea of the new flag and like the old one. And I'm sure there are people on the call who hate the old flag and like the new one. Wherever you stand on this, it's something that passed after a lot of debate in both the Senate and the House. It was an interesting discussion. And interestingly, you can blame the Democrats or give them credit for it, depending on how you feel, because that bill would not have passed the House except for the Democrats, with the exception of one Democrat. The Democratic caucus voted in favor of the new flag. So there you go. You got that. There were a few bad bills, in my humble opinion. And of course, everyone can agree to disagree about various things. But I hated a couple of bills that we passed that really, to me, offended me because they were anti-abortion and they just tightened up to a greater extent than we already have in the trigger ban law. Restrictions on abortion. I am so put off by the quickness, the willingness of my colleagues at the legislature to inject themselves directly into the middle of the most private, personal decisions and conversations and issues that we deal with in our lives, the most deeply felt, the most difficult, the most painful decisions that we have. We have to deal with the Utah State Legislature coming right into our homes and lives and saying, we will tell you what you can and can't do. I'm sorry. I know there are some people on the call that disagree hardly about this, but I am so worked up about this. Nothing inflames me more than to see us as a Utah State Legislature mess around with this. And I will go to the grave fighting it with tooth and nail. But 467, Representative Lisenby's abortion bill passed, unfortunately, basically putting healthcare services dealing with abortion out of reach for anybody except unless they go to the hospital. Planned Parenthood clinics can still stay open, but they can't provide any healthcare services relating to abortion, which is actually a small percentage of what they do. So my hope and expectation would be that Planned Parenthood clinics will still be around to provide information about reproductive information about reproduction for all sorts of people and contraceptives and things like that. But that bill was, I thought, a terrible bill. HB 297, Care Birkeland's bill, was a bill that was making it harder for individuals who women who end up being impregnated by sexual assault to be able to get access to abortion services, because it requires that before you can have an abortion, you have to report the sexual assault that caused the impregnation to law enforcement. We have abysmally low reporting rates for sexual assault in Utah and across the country, and this is not going to help. This is going to make it less likely, I think, that women choose to report those. So the last thing I'll tell you is, and this was touched on by Senator Plum, we have vouchers in exchange for a big salary increase. That was HB 215. That was very troubling to me. I just don't, and again, Brian Jensen may agree or disagree, or reasonable minds can disagree about this, but the best information that I'm seeing from across the country is that there's not a lot of great empirical data and evidence to show that vouchers improve outcomes for our kids. And in fact, they, from what I understand and what I read and see, they end up resulting in subsidizing those who have the resources to have their kids sent to private school, and not really helping the population that most needs vouchers. So I thought it was an unfortunate thing that we started going down the voucher road. And then the last thing that we had was we had the removal of earmarks. Put on the vote was taken to put on the ballot whether Utahns want to vote to remove the earmark for the education fund, for the income tax fund completely, and tied to that and dangling out as an incentive to try to get people to approve that was, if and only if you vote for that, we'll remove some portion, not all of it, but a portion of the sales tax on food, the state portion of the sales tax on food. So those were good things and bad things. I don't like that removal of the earmark and tying it to the sales tax on food, removing the sales tax on food. I thought that was a bad thing in case I didn't make clear my thoughts on that, but that's just a partial list, a very partial list of stuff that we handled in our Utah State Legislature. I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Questions, anyone? Just unmute yourself. We don't always get these, you know, these high hitters at our meetings. And we're glad when we do have a great opportunity to reach out and speak to them if you'd like to do that now. Lynn, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for your service, Brian. We always appreciate you representing us so well. I'm very disturbed at the trend going on at the legislature, not about education, but more importantly, how developers are getting all these bills through to have taxpayers pay for the infrastructure that in the past they've had to do on their own when they develop a land use. So I think that's wrong. I just think that's wrong to make the taxpayers pay for that infrastructure development. What was the discussion on that? I mean, I know how many developers and builders there are in our legislature, but I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Lynn, was there a particular bill that you were looking at? Or
Oh, I can't remember the bills. That one passed actually to have the tax. They got millions, 1.95, no, more than that. Quite a bit, millions of dollars to develop Point of the Mountain with the previous prison site, to develop the infrastructure there for water, sewer, you name it.
Yeah, no, well, look, I'm with you in the sense that we got more developers than you can shake a stick at. It used to be that lawyers were the predominant occupation of the legislature, and maybe that's still true. We got plenty of lawyers, but I raised my hand. But I'll tell you, we got more developers, and I mean, you can't hardly turn around without bumping into one up within the chain, in terms of the elected officials, let alone the lobbyists. And here's the challenge that we've got. You can frame the need to come up with taxpayer incentives in the context of addressing our deeply affordable and affordable housing issues. And some of them do that. Now, there was a very interesting vote that we took. I represent my little district. House District 23 is the only House district in Salt Lake County that goes outside the Salt Lake County boundaries. It goes up into Summit County a little bit. We had to do that as part of our redistricting process and making the populations of the districts in Salt Lake County relatively equal. And so I take in about 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 folks up at Summit Park. So I familiarize myself with what's going on in Summit County. And there was a bill that passed that had a late amendment that nobody really understood or knew about to subsidize the development there at Kimball Junction. And boy, I'll tell you, the folks in Summit County were hopping mad, and I didn't hear about it until afterward voted on it. I voted yes, along with Representative Kohler, who also represents Summit County, and Representative Birkeland, who also represents part of Summit County. And Birkeland and Kohler and I got together and put our heads together after that vote and said, wait, what happened? And we were all irritated, to say the least. We were more than irritated. We were mad about the fact that we didn't understand what negative impact this had on Summit County. And so we raised that little hullabaloo and tried to get things fixed, and we weren't successful. But the reason I'm telling you that story, Lynn, is because the folks who were, many, not all, but some of the folks who were concerned about affordable housing came back to me when I said, hey, I cast a wrong vote on that. This is a terrible project. We shouldn't do it. They came back to me and said, wait a second. Affordable housing is a big part of that development up there at Kimball Junction. And you were right to vote for it in the first place, and you're wrong to now criticize it. So by putting an element of affordable housing for, for not just deeply affordable housing is for people beyond a certain level of the FPL, the federal poverty limit. Deeply affordable housing is for really, really people who can't otherwise get into homes or shelter. I mean, they're literally on the street a lot of times. Affordable housing has a higher threshold of income, but affordable housing issues are kind of like you've got a 25-year-old daughter or son who just got married and they're struggling to get into their first home. Well, we need to address both those affordability issues, but we need to address them a little differently. And there are different issues and different problems to some extent. And the real estate development group is very creative and clever in trying to get support for various things that they want by mixing in the affordability issue. That's number one. Number two, when you're talking about the point out at the point of the mountain, that is seen by the governor and the Office of Economic Development for the state of Utah and other business development people, economic development people, as being a key project for much bigger issues than just the development of the point. And so they've come and persuaded legislative leadership that the legislature needs to fund to a significant degree the development of the point, not necessarily to line any developer's pocket, but with the idea in mind that this is a keystone for a growing population in northern Utah County and in southern Salt Lake County. And if we do this right, there are going to be great benefits across the board. And if we screw it up and do it wrong, we're going to really suffer some negative consequences. And you know what? They may be right about that. But that's the kind of arguments that we deal with all the time, and trying to be persuaded to kind of pick winners and losers among various things that come before us in the legislature. That's a long answer to your question, Lynn, and I apologize, but I'm trying to point out this is complex and there are a lot of moving parts, and we sometimes make the wrong decision and sometimes we make good decisions, but we do the best we can.
They get a lot I just wanted to say they get a lot of tax incentives and a lot of tax benefits anyway. And I think they try to posture it as, and this will cost the homeowners and for affordable housing less money. That's what they did to cheapen the building products in HB 103 during the interim session. That's what they keep doing. But really, they're passing the costs on to taxpayers. And I think that's wrong.
I get your point.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about 364, the affordable housing bill. There was two, 406 and 364. So yeah,
you know all about that, Jan.
no, boy, how we were on that one. There's a question in the chat, and I don't know if this is for Brian Jensen or if you want to handle this.
It is, Jan. It's from me, Roger.
Yeah, Roger wanted to ask it. Roger, do you want to just go ahead?
Thank you.
Speak up. Yeah.
I'm very interested in the declining school population. Certainly, we see it all around us. Certainly, the demographics of the valley I would anticipate changing. I don't know if that for a fact, but I anticipate that they are. I'm wondering if the Salt Lake School District is tracking how they're obviously, I'm sure, tracking the population demographic changes, but are they also tracking who is opting out of public education? So we've got at least two things hitting this population availability for the schools: the decline or the changing demographic of the city, and those that are just opting out of the process. And do you have any insight for me on that? I really don't know. I don't have an opinion. I'm just curious what's being done to either track it or to learn from it, or what's going on there.
Brian, go ahead, and we've got two Brians. This is Brian Jensen. If you want to unmute yourself, Brian.
We are trying to follow some of that. And one of the things that we have been trying to do as a school board and a school district is to find opportunities to have students come back to the Salt Lake City School District. We did lose, we lost students during the pandemic, and some of them have not come back. Some of the programs that we have tried to use, well, the Salt Lake City School District, we went ahead and initiated full-time kindergarten last year before it was even, before the legislature had, funded full-time kindergarten. We went ahead and implemented that in the Salt Lake City School District, and that did bring some families back. We also had a virtual elementary school, and it's still functioning. In the beginning, there was more interest and more students. As time goes on, we're seeing a decline in the virtual elementary school, but there's still some real passion for maintaining that. The challenge with that is the expense of doing that. When you're talking about that, I think one of the challenges that the Salt Lake City School District faces is that voucher program. And when you have an $8,000 opportunity to use a voucher to go to a private school or to go to a charter school or to have homeschooling, it does impact the school districts. And in that work that I was doing with the JLC and on that other board and on the school board here in Salt Lake City, we're concerned about that. The challenge that you have with that voucher program is those schools that they have the option to attend, there isn't the accountability for the education. There isn't any
Brian,
accountability.
I appreciate that. And so I'm just trying to relate this to my family. I have a number of grandchildren that are in the Salt Lake School District. And I'd say half of my family has opted out of Salt Lake School District, not because of the vouchers, just because of the quality of the education. And so and again, what can we do to help improve the quality so we get people back in? Because it needs to be there.
You're right. And I really appreciate that comment. Okay, so one of the things that I would answer to that is Salt Lake City School District is the only school district that really uses shared governance. What that means is at the site level, so the different schools, there's those SECs. And I have been very concerned, and I've worked with East High. They had a very small number of individuals that were participating in the SEC a year ago, and that has significantly increased. And the SEC has a real voice. I mean, they're able to determine how land trust funds are allocated. They're able to participate in the behavior. It's called PBIS. That means positive behavior incentive systems. So they have an opportunity to participate with schools in how the discipline is going in the schools. And I am really trying to encourage parents to come back and have a more significant voice in the school. I talked about that last Tuesday night in our board meeting, how I don't believe that the Salt Lake City School District has done a good job in helping parents to understand how to participate. And so there was a conversation about how we can educate our community to use those tools.
Well, thank you. I hope that we're successful. I'd hate to see our school system continue to
Oh,
decline.
yeah. And I mean, you parents that are involved that come and, okay, voice your concerns, but then also roll up your sleeves. That I've seen the impact that it's had. I mean, I was just at Clayton Elementary Monday, and there's a really good example of educators and teachers working together, and 200 children are having an incredible experience. And yeah, we might say that, well, yeah, that's arts related. It's a lot more than art. There's education going on there. Those students, they're being supported with teachers and volunteers that are working with them in after school programs on their homework while they're there waiting for their time to do their part. I mean, to me, that's a wonderful example.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Brian, any questions for Brian? Brian, I want to thank you as well. I saw you on the Hill. I had a meeting with you with a bunch of other people. Saw you work the room at the Democratic Caucus. Really appreciate, Brian, your service to our community and to the state of Utah. Any
you're welcome.
questions for
Yes,
Brian?
thank you, Brian, and thank you for responding to the concerns of educators when we were texting you.
Brian,
We-
I'd love to get
we
your
appreciate
comment
it.
about what Brian Jensen just said regarding that whole voucher thing with schools. Do you want to jump in and say anything there?
Well,
King?
I think there's a place for, one of the things that was controversial a few years ago when we first started doing charter schools is people were concerned about charter schools. And I think there was a place and is a place for charter schools, and our public schools, charter schools are public schools, and our public school system has benefited from that. I worry with vouchers that we are going to have a bit of a drain of some of the best supporting families and resources of people for the public education system if we expand and if we put vouchers in place. Like I say, I realize that we can have differing opinions about that. This is a hard-fought subject, and it's been discussed for decades now, of course, across the country. And the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what happens over time with that. But boy, I sure worry for our public education system. When I look at Brian Jensen, I think, and I think Brian Jensen knows too, the overlap between what we're doing at the legislature and what he is doing for the Salt Lake School Board is remarkable. And one of the things that I wanted to say in connection with Roger's question, the legislative, the Office of Legislative Auditor General up at the legislature did us a audit of the Salt Lake School District just last year. And I'm sure that Brian Jensen has seen it and looked carefully at it, but it addressed with some detail and specificity these declining enrollment numbers. And a big part of that is just demographic. I mean, part of it is people leaving the Salt Lake public school system for other alternatives, but a big part of it is demographic too. And one of the things I think that the school board, and of course, Brian Jensen is in a much better position to address this specifically than I am, is closing some of the schools that are really, I mean, we've got some schools, I can't remember the name of the school, Brian Jensen, but I know that there's a school on 8th East between 4th and 5th South that is like 28 or 33% capacity, and so that is one thing. I'm not here to say that what the school board should do, because I think that requires a deep dive that they're in the best position to carry out, but I do think that that is going to have to be addressed.
James Payer, you're on.
Yeah.
And you've got a question. James, go ahead with your question for Brian King.
Hi, Brian. James Payer. I'm co-chair with the Yellowcrest Council. There's a proposal, HJR 07, that proposed to amend the Utah Constitution to provide that the legislative power of the state includes the power to provide for the revival of cause of action for child sexual abuse after the expiration of the statute of limitations. The bill passed in 2016, putting that into place for like 3 years. So you know, as we know that if something happens to a child, they're not quick to report it, and it had some ridiculously low, like 2-year statute of limitations or 3-year. So there was a 3-year period where we successfully changed that law to include increasing the statute of limitations so people could come much later. But then it was challenged at the state Supreme Court. And they were saying that the state constitution would need to be changed to give that legislator that power. And I'm just wondering what happened to that bill, because I was at the committee meeting and it passed overwhelmingly the committee to go to the House, but it looks like it got circled or nothing happened.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, James. That's a bill that Ken Ivory, who is in the House and has been in the House for many years, on and off. He was there for 6 or 8 years, and then he left for a term or two, and now he's back. Ken and I are ideological foes. He's an attorney, and he's really, really conservative on some issues that he and I just fundamentally disagree about, and so we spar quite often. But this is his bill, and this is something that he and I have found some common ground on, because I'm with him on this. And when it was, and you're absolutely right, the bill passed with no problem in committee. It was my committee. I voted for the bill, spoke to it, supporting it. It was the Judiciary Committee, and then we went to the House, and it was on the board, and it was circled. When a bill is circled, that just means consideration of the bill is postponed. Can be postponed for any one of a number of reasons. Sometimes bills are circled because the sponsor is off the floor when the bill is called to be heard. Sometimes it's circled because we're waiting for a fiscal note, or we're waiting for an amendment or a substitute bill. But this bill sat there for several days, and I finally went over to Ken and I said, "Hey, Ken, what's going on? We ought to hear that bill. We ought to pass it out." And he said, "It's not passing." I said, "How come?" He said, "We're still working on it, but there's some people that have some concerns." So I don't think he's giving up. Ken's spouse, Ken's wife, Becky, it's not my story to tell, of course, but she's told publicly a harrowing story of sexual abuse when she was a high school student from a teacher. And he's really, this is right in, Ken feels strongly about this. He's not going to give up on this bill. He's not going to go away. He was the one that passed the bill back in 2016 too. He was a sponsor of that bill, and I supported that bill. The Supreme Court struck it down. I understood why they struck it down. I didn't agree with them, but they basically said, we're not going to let you go back and revive a cause of action against someone against whom the limitation of action has already expired. That's unfair in a fundamental due process way. And so if we amend the Constitution, I think we can get around that concern, because as you alluded to, there's so many people who suffer abuse as a child, and they're not in a position to bring wrongdoers to justice until many years later. It's not like at age 18 they remember everything and they're in a position to act on it. So I like that bill, but bottom line is I think Ken Ivory's going to continue to work on it. We'll see what happens with it.
Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Anyone else? We've had a really lively discussion tonight. I really have appreciated the give and take and the thoughtfulness that has come and insights. We've got our two great local government folks that are hanging in there with us as we wrap up our meeting. We've got City Councilman Dan Dugan. We appreciate his service. And Hannah Barton, who's with the mayor's office. We appreciate her service. And if you two want to just kind of finish it out and take the time that you need to inform us of some great things that you're doing and what's going on.
Thanks, Jan. Appreciate that. And I appreciate the comments from Brian and Senator Plum also. It was as Brian said, I would say there's some wins and losses at the legislative session this year for the city. We worked very closely with the league on a number of bills, and we got a couple stopped that were pressing. As Lynn Pershing was talking about developers. There was one bill that was going to give some developers and some people some powers that are only given to elected officials, and it was a Senate Bill 295, and that was they were going to give us some eminent domain. They gave us some taxing authorities to unelected officials, and the league and the city fought till the end on that one, and I said it didn't pass, but that doesn't mean it's dead. I think there's going to be a lot of interim discussions on this, and it's going to come back at us. So, across the board, a lot of developers in the legislative house want us to develop faster, more, quicker, now across the state. And they're really pushing us hard to do that, and we're trying to throttle them back in some sense. We did get House Bill 499, which is the homeless mitigation bill passed, and that gave us more funding for the Salt Lake City and to support the homeless population. And we got some concessions from Utah County and Davis County to look at getting resources centers down in their counties in, I think, 2025. So we made some progress there. It was great working with Wayne Niederhauser and the county on getting some funding for the deeply affordable and the homeless shelter stuff. So I'm appreciative of all the work we did on that end. A couple bills that we didn't get through is one bill called Senate Bill 105. Jerry Stevenson was the sponsor on it. I was very in favor of the bill. I spoke on it for this bill. This was the traffic enforcement bill to allow cameras at schools and construction zones. I was in favor of it at the early stages in the very beginning. It got kind of watered down as it went on, and then it failed to pass at the end. But it got a number of votes. I didn't think it was even going to get out of the committee, but it did get some traction. I hope we can bring that bill back, and hopefully we can get some more momentum on that. There's some people that are really concerned about having traffic cameras and cameras taking pictures of their cars. And we just have to get their fear over that problem, because we got to look at the safety of our kids and the safety of walkers and others in the streets. I'm hopeful that we can get it passed in another year or two, but this one will probably take time. Another bill that didn't pass was the governor's request for fairless transportation for UTA. Last year, Salt Lake City budgeted out of our own general funds to fund school kids and teachers and staff passes for the school district. It's been a success for Salt Lake City School District. I want to continue that in their school district, but I'm going to try to keep pushing that we get that across the UTA boundaries and all the boundaries, because I think that will increase our use of public transportation, and then that will also increase the ability that we can get more public transportation, say on Foothill up to the university, up into the VA hospital and other places, and the hospitals. So I'm going to continue pushing for that, but we didn't get that one passed in this thing. There was a few other bills that we were working with the league on making sure that we had Salt Lake City's interest in, and they were a full court press until the very end. But I'm grateful for some, and I'm disappointed in others, as I think a number of us are. On the home front, we did a open groundbreaking at the Other Side Village yesterday. There's a ceremonial groundbreaking. They still have to do remediation before they actually can start construction, but they're looking at having there are a number of their homes built by next year. It was an exciting cold afternoon, but it was. I'm glad to see that project moving forward. We also did a ribbon cutting on a Colonial B, which is affordable housing from the 30 to 50, the mixed affordable housing unit downtown. 100 units for the 30 to 50% AMI. Some units for kids who are, I call them kids because they're transitioning from foster care out into adulthood. Some units for them, some that are ADA compliable. So that was ribbon cutting. We also did ribbon cutting for Sparks, which is another mixed affordable housing on North Temple. So we continue to build mixed affordable housing, deeply affordable housing. I'm looking forward to in end of May or end of April when we have 3 new deeply affordable wraparound service units being to house like about 450 people go into operation as the winter overflow shelters close down. So that will be a good transition from the winter overflow shelters into actually permanent supportive housing later on. As we all aware, the ADU ordinance, Jan and I have been talking about that. A number of us have been talking about that. We still have some, I got to make a few more phone calls here to press on the owner occupancy. A few of us are working hard to make sure that's a reality. Remember, we need 4 votes to make that reality. That won't come up until the 21st is when I think the public hearing is on the 21st. And but we won't be voting at that time because we'll still have to listen and digest that. And then the affordable housing overlay has a March 22nd date for the planning commission. That's the planning commission public hearing. That's on the 22nd. That's the day after our council meeting, so it's Wednesday. We're still looking at the North Point and the master plan there, the small area master plan there. There's a lot of concerns about the environmental concerns there and the water concerns of the North Point area. We're still in discussions that we have a long ways to go before we pass anything. We're still in the a lot of questions and a lot of discussions on the legal side of the house and how we can make the words stronger than that. And I'm focused on that part also. Ranked choice voting, we're going to have ranked choice voting in the city again. We passed that at this most recently. And that's in a quick nutshell.
Any questions of Dan? Hannah, take it away. And
Thanks, Jen. I promise I will be quick. I have an update. The Salt Lake City Planning Division is proposing updates to the zoning ordinance on site distance triangle regulations. I just sent this to you, Jan, last week, so maybe it's already been distributed to folks, but I wanted to highlight this anyway. The current regulations require fences, walls, and hedges be of limited height when located along the intersections of streets, the intersections of driveways and streets, and the intersections of driveways and sidewalks. And it requires that there's a clear zone area at those intersections to increase vehicular and pedestrian safety. The current code, however, does not include regulations for intersections with alleys or intersections with buildings that encroach into the site distance triangle. And so the proposed updates focus on adding language regarding alleys and other structures to the site distance triangle regulations. So really just the main purpose of those proposed updates is to increase pedestrian and vehicle safety by restricting obstructions that would decrease visibility in those intersection areas. The updates to the code would only apply to new fences or structures. Anything existing would be grandfathered in and would only have to comply with the new code if the structure was moved or changed. So there is an online open house just ongoing with more information. I also will put in the chat, I'll put a link to that online open house in the chat. And I will include contact information for the city planner that is working on that. So you can submit comments or ask questions. She's very helpful. Her name is Madison. And the comment period for those for that proposal closes on April 1st. So we still have 3 weeks there if anyone has questions or comments on those proposed changes. Also wanted to let everyone know that my office hours for the month of March in District 6 will be on Monday, March 20th. I will be at the Corner Bakery from 12 to 2. That's on the corner of Foothill and Wakara, and I'll be there around lunchtime. So come stop by and chat with me about things going on in the city. I'm always happy to talk with people. So yeah, does anyone have any questions for me?
Lynn,
Hi, Lynn.
Lynn, you're not muted. You're unmute yourself.
Sorry, Hannah, this, and that's triangulation regulation. One of the problems we have when you have commercial neighborhood districts like we do in Yellowcrest, the cars are parking so close to the edge of the intersections that the side traffic going east and west can't even see around, and we can't see the traffic going north south. So some of those areas need to be painted for no parking. Because, I mean, we've almost had 2 accidents here in the last month coming off of Laird because you can't see around those cars. The CN, the commercial neighborhood district, they're so popular, the businesses we have here, and we're happy that they're popular. But we just need to have safer walking, lots and lots of families with young children walk to Laird Park across the 1700 East. We almost had a woman in her carriage with her baby hit the other day. It's really unsafe. We need them not to park so close to the intersection. So painting it's a law. You have to have so many feet there. I forget if it's 20
Yeah, it
feet.
is.
But anyway, if you
Yeah.
could look into that and add that to that regulation, thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, happy to flag that for parking compliance too and see if they can get up in that area, because that's definitely a law.
And we did promote and sent something out on our newsletter, Hannah, about
Awesome.
the triangle. But we will continue to do that. We're not the most active in the social media world. I think ELPCO puts something out every day. I mean, these guys they're almost like a news service.
Yeah, that's okay. No worries.
I've
I
gotten
appreciate
that
you getting it out.
active. Yeah, we haven't quite got that active in Yocrest, but we try to be, on top of some of those issues. We had a really good visit with all of our police officers, including the highway patrol. We had coffee with a cop up at Starbucks. And, honestly, that was so enjoyable to just sit down face to face with these great people who serve our community. So I just hope, as neighbors, when those opportunities come up, that we'll take advantage of it, because really, we sit in our homes sometimes and we complain about everything, right? And the best way to do that is to have a conversation if you've got an issue. So anything else? We kind of ran over a little bit, but we had a lively meeting tonight. Anybody want to add anything before we end? Brian and let's see, do we lose our other Brian? I think we lost our other Brian, but Brian, thank you again. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Hannah. Oh, Brian's back on. Okay. All of you, we will meet again in April. And thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Jen.
you.
Nice job.
Thanks.